Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, I took a look at Joe Cocker at Woodstock 1969 with his performance of With a Little Help from My Friends. Unfortunately, it got blocked worldwide on copyrights, so it's going to be another interactive video. You guys know the drill. The link's going to be in the description below to the video that I watched, so click on that in order to watch the performance. I'm also going to pin it to the top of the comments, so go and watch that and then come back here for the analysis, and I'll see you guys in the comments section. I'm just going to jump in here. This is one of those performances that is almost impossible to interrupt, but I'm going to put the link to this in the description below as always, so you guys can watch it the whole way through without any interruptions. But the thing about Joe Cocker vocally, of course, it sounds like he has got the option of a distortion pedal for his vocal cords because he can go to such a heavy sound. So you get such a light and shade in Joe's delivery vocally from the verse, just having that talking quality to it. Obviously, there's going to be a tiny bit of rasp on there just because that is Joe's voice. But then once he starts leaning into the sound and going full distortion in chest voice, by the way, it's all belted in chest here. And that's why you feel the emotion the whole time. There's no shortcuts here. Joe is never going up into a light head voice sound or falsetto. He's just belting, and that's where the emotion is. The other thing that we've got that does add that light and shade in this performance and the song are those high backing harmonies that come in the chorus and the verses. But here, hats off to the guys, because a full male band, but the backing vocals, which are right up there, by the way, an E flat 5, consistently being hit by the male vocal in the background. So it is such a difficult track to pull off live for an all-male band, but they absolutely do it here. So we're going to get that contrast vocally between those really high backing harmonies and then Joe's vocal when he's really belting out his G4 and F4 down to E4. It's all around that range when he's belting. He does actually later in the song belt out a really distorted E flat, which is right up there. I'm talking about the E flat 5. So it's crazy height in terms of the range that he covers, but it's so distorted you might not hear that underlying note. And this is what the great singers can do. They can take you on a journey just with their vocal cords, taking you from such a light place to such a heavy, distorted and place that's really full of emotion and so much soul in there. But we're talking about not even considering the backing and the composition as a whole, just with the voice. So you've gone on that journey with the vocal cords of Joe and having such a wide dynamic range that he's got as well, being able to belt and taking you to that small place in the verse if he wants to. The other thing about Joe is when he's singing, when he's performing, it is a performance. He's putting every ounce of himself into the delivery of his vocal. And people can connect to that because they can feel the emotion, the raw emotion that is happening whilst Joe is singing. And how many times have you seen a singer perform on stage and they just stand in the middle of the stage and they might have a great voice, but there's nothing really to connect to. They're not really into the performance. But that is the last thing that you can accuse Joe Cocker of being, is not into a performance. He just throws himself into it 100%. That's the thing that makes this performance so compelling to watch, is the fact that Joe has committed himself to it artistically 100%. And you can watch all of his body movements. It's all part of the song, part of his artistic delivery and his emotion. He's rolled everything into this. And very few performers do that, commit to a song 100% artistically and with their personality. You can tell that Joe is absolutely into this, and the thing that people will connect to is that authenticity. Obviously, everybody knows the journey already, so it is so difficult to have a cover of a song with your own performance when you didn't write the song yourself, but make it your own. And that's exactly what Joe Cocker and the band do with this performance. because it is standalone. Paul McCartney said himself that he was so thankful for Joe's version of this song because he took it to a totally different place than the original composition, giving it such a soulful side to it, to the point where it is now a soul classic because so many people know Joe Cocker's version of it and the amount of soul that he injected into a composition that already existed but did not exist in the way that Joe Cocker could sing it. Let's also throw in there about Joe's accuracy in pitch. I've mentioned about him belting in chest voice the whole time in terms of vocal technique and how he connects to everybody watching it because of the emotion in that chest register, the fact that he can belt it out at the top of his range. But the accuracy that he hits these notes is deceptive because of the amount of rasp on the sound. Go back to the beginning of that first verse. The way that Joe gets straight into that verse on pitch, he is perfect as soon as he starts that vocal. And it is so easy to start a track slightly off pitch because you haven't got your reference point yet as a singer. Sometimes it can take a few lines of vocals in terms of lyrical content and phrases to find your feet vocally and with pitch, especially considering that the intro is so long. It's extended, so it means that when he comes in with those first notes, being on pitch is so difficult, but Joe just has that natural ability to jump straight in, not only on pitch, but with that tone, with that connection and that talking quality to his voice straight off the bat. I think this is one of those videos that could go on all night because of the quality on show, but let's get back into it. We'll watch a little bit more. As I said, links in the description below for the full video. So if I don't make it the whole way through, you guys can go to the link to watch it all the way through. But let's get back into this. I'm just going to jump in here again. He's got that vibrato. It's quite a fast vibrato he's got on his vocal, but it's always in there. There's always a little bit of that just to sell that note. So we're not singing straight notes the whole time. And also having such a thick vocal tone, but some of the throwaway lines that he has just show the flexibility that he has in his vocal cords in order to get those throwaway lines really nice and accurate, classic throwaway blues lines that he's got at the end of those vocal phrases. And the great thing about Joe's voice and the influences that he had in terms of guys like Ray Charles and Muddy Waters, and when he was in a cover band, when he first started out, he covered Chuck Berry tracks. All of those artists you would never say he sounds like, and that's the point. Joe Cocker had such a unique vocal sound and delivery that was his own personality and identity, that he didn't sound like the guys he was influenced by, and that's the whole point of being an artist, is to listen to other guys and hear their expression and listen to the message that they're telling you. Take that on board, but then use those influences to sell your own message, to sell your own personality and get across your own story. I don't want this video to go on for too long. Like I mentioned earlier, this could go on all year because of the quality involved in this performance. But the whole Woodstock event over that weekend in 1969, the amount of legendary performances we had, and I know for a fact that this video will bring up that discussion and debate about music being better in the 60s and the 70s. And in terms of saying music is better or worse, it's going to be impossible because it's an art form. But just taking this as a snapshot in 1969 of the performers, the artistry that was on show, and the level of musical ability and artistry around at the time, you can say, or at least you can objectively say, it was better, purely because the artists at the time were a product of the industry as it was at that time. So it meant that there weren't hundreds of TV channels. There weren't hundreds of radio stations. There wasn't the internet where you can have millions upon millions of other performances and you can upload your own video to your own channel on YouTube, which meant that the people that were focused on, the people that made it to Woodstock were the cream of the crop because they had to be. There wasn't any shortcut in the late 60s in order to sound great. You just had to be great. It was just the recording process at the time, you couldn't fake it. The tape would be running and you had to sing or play an instrument into a microphone, and however that sounded was played back. And that was your take. You couldn't digitally edit that piece of tape. You could only multi-track, and if you were on a big record label, you could maybe do another take, but you couldn't fake it. That was the point back in the late 60s. The other thing is that the music industry is an industry, and it always has been, which means that they're going to produce a product for as least money as possible and then sell it for as much as they can to give you the largest profit margin. So back in the 60s, in order to cut down costs, if you could get an artist and a band who could take less time to record something, you spent less money on tape. You didn't have to keep getting them in to do multiple takes and keep getting more and more tape in. Whereas nowadays, the technology has moved on so much that you can produce a product with an inferior performance, meaning that you no longer need great artists and great singers to do a single take. You can get someone who looks great, therefore might sell more product because they look good on a billboard, but then in the studio they can do one take, and then the take didn't have to be perfect. That can all be post-processed by the technology that exists. So it's win-win. So people that might not be into music production, they'll argue, well, how do we tell the difference if somebody is an artist and they're being auto-tuned, but we don't know how to tell, compared to the guys back in the late 60s who are doing it all totally live? The killer is always the emotion, the connection. All of the artists back in the 60s and the 70s, and Joe Cocker, a great example, when he sings, you can hear the emotion and you can feel the emotion. It is in there. Whereas trying to inject emotion and connection into a performance that didn't originally have it is impossible. And I think that is the main problem that a lot of people have who were brought up on this music back in the 60s. They can't connect to the current artists because the original performance in the studio wasn't full of emotion, because it's tried to be added later with auto-tune and other effects. But you can't do that. You can't make a computer inject emotion into a human. It doesn't work that way. It has to come from the human first time out. And if it doesn't, you just won't have that connection to it. So that is the main difference, that you can't inject it, unfortunately. And no computer is ever going to be able to do that for the rest of time, because a computer will never be a human. But focusing back on Joe, because back in the late 60s, this was the independent artist. This was the only way that artists could get any publicity and play in front of people. And I guarantee you that Joe did not start singing and performing with the idea of becoming a millionaire. It was his passion for music and his passion for the blues that made him get up on stage. And there's no way of faking this. You cannot put this amount of effort and connection into a performance pretending to do it for money. Fortunately, there are so many great examples of artists like this back in the 60s who were the cream of the crop, and they were doing it for their own artistic expression and for their passion for music, and that's what comes across. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!